as HSPs, we can connect with such depth and meaning and sacredness in everything, and that it's not surface level. Like having sex doesn't have to just be this. I mean, it can be lovely and fun and all this, but there can also be this such a depth to it. Same with moving our bodies or being connected with the earth or reading a story. And I think slowing down and connecting with our bodies and embracing the sacredness that comes with that can really help with the authenticity.
Welcome to Sensitive Stories. This episode is for educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for treatment with a mental health or medical professional. Let's dive in.
Hi, Giulietta. Welcome to the podcast.
So excited to be here.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. I'm wondering if you could start off by telling us your HSP discovery story. How or when you realized that you're an HSP, or any part of that journey that you want to share.
Yes, of course. So I always knew I was highly sensitive. My mom is also a highly sensitive person, and I just grew up around a lot of highly sensitive adults, I think, when I was younger. So that was kind of the norm for me when I was a lot younger. As I grew up, though, I recognized that that maybe wasn't the norm in school and with peers and things like that. I felt things just much deeper than other people, or a lot of other people I recognize. I felt sadness deeper. I felt anger. I felt joy, and just everything was a little bit more amplified and intense. And that was kind of a little bit difficult to feel like there was this differences. And so I kind of went back and forth. I think my journey was very much kind of embracing my sensitivity and all that came with that, which was for me being really connected with the earth and with cats and animals and, stories and myth and art. And for me, that was, the sacred, dropping into all of that and then feeling like, oops, that's not okay in this world. And so I'm going to shut that down, push that aside, and just try to numb out and be like everybody else. So that was kind of my journey for a good portion of my life. And knowing I was sensitive, I didn't think, I was just kind of saying, okay, you are sensitive. And so what do you do with that? You just kind of deal. And it wasn't until I think actually a few years after I got licensed where I was just much more tired and burnt out than my colleagues. I was trying to keep the pace up with everybody else. And I was always having, migraines, and I was getting sick, and I was tired, and I just I didn't have the energy that my other therapists seemed to have at the end of the day. And so I was kind of having this kind of existential, what is going on with me? And so I deep dived and I Googled, and I actually found your blog post, which was so helpful. And then found other literature and stories about sensitive people and sensitive therapists. And it was just this huge moment of, oh, okay, I'm sensitive and I can't be living like a less sensitive person.
Absolutely. I think everyone has that kind of breaking point almost. And it's interesting. Your story is a little different than most that I hear, in the sense that you did grow up with other sensitive adults and having that in your world, and almost that became the norm. And then you go out and you realize, oh, I am different than this bubble at home, and maybe that's not okay. Is that what was happening? Then you feel like you have to change to fit in to the outside world?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, I also saw my mom struggle with her sensitivity. Even to this day, she still has had a hard time finding her place in the world. And so for me, at home, we were both just sensitive and a little sensitive, family, but I kind of saw that she struggled with that sensitivity in the world. And for me, I kind of felt like if I'm going to be, functioning in the world or successful or whatever you want to call it in this world, I need to just push that aside and push through. And so I think it was that. And then also just really wanting to not be different. When you're
Yeah.
a kid and a preteen and teen, you just kind of want to be part of the norm. And so
Yeah.
I think those pieces were really part of that pushing that side of me down.
Yeah, we can't get away from that, right?
Yeah.
That urge or that instinct to fit in and be
Hmm.
part of the village. Um, it's tough. And even as you're seeing sensitivity at home, you're also seeing the struggles of sensitivity,
Yeah.
right? You can't escape that. Um, so how do you start to honor your sensitivity, and find a sense of authenticity and not change yourself?
Yeah. And I think that's kind of was actually part of that aha moment for
Yeah.
me. Because prior to having this kind of moment of, I'm always sick and tired and what's going on with me? And oh, I'm sensitive and maybe life has to look a little different for me. Sensitivity was connected with not the greatest things. Oh, you don't fit in this world, or things are too stimulating or too much. And then I started to really connect with the beauty of sensitivity that, oh, when we actually drop in and aren't in burnout and feel connected with ourselves, everything feels so alive and beautiful and authentic. And that's been really my journey since that kind of breaking aha moment where,
Hmm.
oh, there's so much incredible qualities of being a sensitive person, that we can feel these levels of depth and heart connection and love, and just everything is so beautiful when we can really allow ourselves to drop into sensitivity.
It really is. And I see you embody that
Mhm.
joy, that bliss, the curiosity.
Yeah.
Um, and that is what opens up to us when we can accept ourselves and kind of live at our own speed as sensitive people. And you mentioned, you were, which a lot of people find this out as therapists when they reach that burnout or that kind of too much moment. And is that the point where you start to realize, oh, there is something here to hold on to, that I need to make a change? Or was that already happening up until that point? I wonder, that path to authenticity.
Yeah, I think that's when I recognized, I think I was already kind of on an authenticity path, but I wasn't on a slowing down path until that
Mm.
moment. And once I slowed down, that's kind of when I recognized kind of connecting with my nervous system, feeling more grounded. And then when I did that, I discovered these parts of me had been shutting down for a long time, where I was reconnecting back with the earth and reconnecting back with
Yes.
my, you know, inner love of cats and animals and myths and archetypes and all of those things.
Yes.
And so the less I numbed my sensitivity, the more I discovered all of these amazing qualities of my sensitivity that had actually just been tucked away for so many years.
Yeah, they were waiting
Hmm.
under the
Yeah.
surface. And I really appreciate you differentiated that. There's the authenticity path, but we could burn out on that path.
Hmm.
Doing I'll say this about myself, like sometimes I burn myself out from the inside out because I'm
Yep.
just doing so much of what I love and I'm interested in. And I feel that from you, like, well, I can feel your excitement vibrating, like, oh, you're really loving this, and I can feel it, and it's beautiful to watch. And when I'm in that space, I can push it too far.
Yep.
So, like, we have to also slow it down a little bit. So I appreciate that distinction. And before we go on, I want to check in because you named myth
Hmm.
archetypes as part of your practice and what lights you up. For folks who maybe are new to those terms, who haven't heard that, could you say a little bit more about what those are? What you're
Totally.
referencing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've always loved myths. Actually, I first really did a deep dive in them in my undergrad program in psychology. I went to just a traditional state school, but we had a whole program all about myths and ego psychology and archetypes. It was the coolest thing. And so myths really are this experience throughout humanity. We've had myths, which are basically stories. We've heard of the hero's journey. We've heard of different goddesses like Persephone or Aphrodite, different mythology that kind of explain the seasons, life cycles, our experience of aging, our experience of going through grief or trauma and healing. birth and death, all of those pieces. And I feel like myth to me has been such an experience of kind of connecting with this collective, of feeling less alone, of feeling connected with, all of our ancestors and other fellow humans that have been here before us, and the earth and all of those symbols. And archetypes are big parts of myths. They're, frequently known as, the lover, the hero, or the warrior, or, all these kind of more the caregiver, different archetypes that show up. And each of them has their own journey of wholeness, of embracing the shadow parts of themselves, the parts that help them feel whole and less fragmented and feel more alive in this world. And so I feel like as HSPs, myths and this experience of descent and ascent and wholeness is such a rich experience, because I think a lot of us can relate to that.
Oh, we absolutely can. We love the depth, the layers,
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
exploration. And I feel like these stories, these archetypes or types of people just provide this kind of sense of structure or framework for
Hmm.
us to help understand ourselves or the world. Is that too simple?
I think that is exactly kind of how it feels, and something that in my own journey and even kind of working with clients, sometimes I think, can feel there's kind of this term that shows up with these underworld myths is, we go into this dark night of the soul
Yeah.
where we feel disconnected from everything. We feel like there's no meaning to life. We feel this existential dread. We kind of think, why am I in so much pain, or why am I suffering? Why did this happen? And myths and these archetypes can help us kind of recognize this as part of life, is that we go through darkness and shadow and pain, and we heal and integrate and find new layers of resilience and new layers of authenticity. And so it's kind of recognizing, okay, I'm down in another descent, and it makes meaning out of this really messy human journey that we're all on. Yeah.
Yeah, that meaning is such a helpful anchor,
Hmm.
especially during times of grief or transformation or
Yeah.
life change or just exploration. So, Dark Night of the Soul, could we share an example of what that might look like in someone's life? Is that when they lose someone or they are discovering a part of themselves that was hidden, or what might that look like?
Yeah. I think it's kind of those moments where it feels like everything has been stripped away, whether we've gone through a trauma, we've gone through a loss, even a loss of identity, whether that's a
Yeah.
career shift or burnout or an illness, things like that. It just feels like, who am I and why am I here?
Yeah.
And I think that's that pattern of just sitting in that darkness and recognizing that this darkness is actually this place of transformation. It kind of reminds me of, a butterfly in the cocoon, right? You kind of
Yeah.
like fall apart and come together. That's kind of how I
Yes.
view that dark night of the soul, where everything gets stripped away and everything feels so dark and disconnected, but it's this pattern of putting everything together and kind of coming out transformed. Like, we're always going to be changed by this
Right.
darkness, but that change can actually be this really incredible new layer of our human journey.
So we don't have to be afraid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's like with anything, this is a very simple example, but we talked about this in grad school, but you have to take everything out of the closet first to organize it and put it all
Hmm.
back together. Same thing
Yeah.
happens with like surgery or any
Hmm.
type of transformation. It gets messy before it
Yeah.
gets beautiful again. And that feels reassuring, especially in that inner darkness when you feel kind of
Hmm.
hopeless or confused or uncertain. It's like, no, there's a butterfly coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And so with myths specifically, because I know this is something you use a lot, how can we use them to move through our transformation of the chrysalis to the butterfly, and what does that look like?
Yeah. I think one thing that I really love about myths is there's no judgment that comes with them. They're all these kind of characters. I'm really personally drawn to kind of the Greek and Roman mythology. That's part of my ancestry, and so I've been so drawn to them. And they're just so dramatic. There's just so much like cool drama. But when I think of their journeys, they have this intense jealousy that happens, or these traumas that they go through, or these really wild awakenings that they go through. But every time that you explore them, there's this new nugget of wisdom, and we can often see ourselves in maybe a less dramatic version of ourselves. But oh, yeah, you know what? I do have that jealousy part of me, or I do have that despair, or I do have that part of me that feels like I can't be myself, or that I'm overcoming, obstacles. And so through looking at myths, we can kind of see like I'm going through this just as how many generations of other humans have gone through this.
Right. So normalizing.
It normalizes it. And it's just this experience of this just is just like this dark. Now, this is part of the human journey. We all have these things we need to look at and process. And so myths is this, I think, a lot less of a shamey way to kind of drop in and look at them, and look at parts of ourselves that maybe would be a little more scary to look at otherwise.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a helpful guide, so you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
Just have this a bit of a map, so to speak. Yeah, and I love that that's personal to you. You feel connected to it, makes sense.
Yeah.
And I imagine abuse more meaning to the process. Are there other, so you're mostly working with Greek Roman myths. Are there other types of myths someone might work with or be drawn to?
Yeah. So one thing that when I've worked with clients around this, and some clients I work just very much more, traditional sex and couples therapy, but I do have, especially a lot of my more highly sensitive clients, we love the depth work and the creative work.
Me too.
So, I'll even have clients sometimes talk about, literature that they're reading, right? Or a book or a movie and what that awakened for them. So I think myths, our movies and, trilogies and things, those are our modern day myths, right? So that's one thing that we can look at. I also think there is something beautiful about connecting with our own lineage and ancestry. And so, sometimes when clients are doing their own healing around, messages they've internalized, or ways that, their parents have had their own traumas, they're also connecting with how do I embrace these beautiful wisdom nuggets, right? From my ancestry, from my lineage, from my culture, from my grandparents. And so that can be a really beautiful thing to explore from that perspective as well. So I think there's a few different ways that we can embrace myth and find really what resonates with us. That's the beauty. There's endless myths, endless movies, literature, cultural myths. There's something for everybody.
I love that because if let's say you are drawn to thinking like a fantasy series and there's a character in that story that you're drawn to, you could use that as maybe as a container with which to work with what you're going through if you relate to it. I think that's we've talked about this on the pod a little bit, but this I think takes a level deeper around. A lot of times we don't see ourselves maybe out in the world, but we might see ourselves in a story. Or we don't see our experience reflected, but we might find it in a myth. Something in our lineage. Could be incredibly healing, I would guess.
Yeah, it makes us feel less alone because I think, it can be a little bit lonely sometimes in this world, especially things are kind of not super sensitive in the world right now. And there is something I think so healing about seeing a part of yourself represented and knowing that these themes, they show up everywhere, whether that's the hero's journey or highly sensitive people show. I mean, even some of these Greek and Roman myths, I'm like, oh, I think that that one's HSP. There's ways of people coming into wholeness, authenticity, healing through all these different forms of story, really, which is beautiful and much more connecting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. When you see parts of yourself or your whole self represented in someone else, it's incredible. I just feel so safe.
Yeah.
Emotionally, physically. And this is not something I work with in my practice. I'm wondering if you
Mhm.
could kind of paint the picture a little bit for us. So
Yeah.
let's say I am drawn to a myth,
Hmm.
whether it's cultural, present day,
Hmm.
or something deeper from my lineage or from maybe some of the resources that you've created around Greek and Roman mythology. Um, let's say, okay, I have the myth or the archetype that I'm working with. What does that process look like? What do I do once I find the connection? I'm just curious what that might look like.
Yeah. And I think the beauty again is it can look so different for everybody that there's no one size fits all. But a few of the different ways that I've kind of worked with it is for some clients, it's really doing this inner kind of meditation work. So there might be a symbol. I've had it even where people weren't even sure what that myth was yet, but we kind of did this inner journey of descent, of going into that kind of underworld and connecting with these parts of themselves and then integrating and healing and kind of ascending. And they're recognizing, oh, like there's this really wounded child part of me, or there's this really angry part of me. And then we can kind of explore how those themes have shown up in humanity, those
Mm.
parts of ourselves. So can go that way. Or sometimes, some of my clients, I'll say, can I get a little, hippie or witchy with you for a sec? Bring some goddess stuff in? And if they're down, I usually know who's down with that. And
Yeah.
so I'll kind of bring it in and I'll say, this feels like an underworld journey that you're in. And we'll
Mm.
kind of explore the underworld themes and kind of talk about how that shows up in different myths, modern day stories, ancient stories, and talk about how they can start to integrate and not run into the underworld, try to kick and scream from getting dragged into the underworld versus saying, okay, I'm in the underworld. What do I do?
Yeah, right. I'm in the
Yeah.
darkness. Let me find some light.
Hmm.
And so we can be working maybe with multiple myths at the same time for
Yeah,
different parts of ourselves. I
definitely.
love that. Because sometimes, if we have that angry part, or maybe we have that joyful part that just wants
Mhm.
to frolic and be free and be
Yeah.
playful, but we can make space for both of those and find kind of objects to attach to or stories to attach to. I love that.
And feel whole and less fragmented. I think that's the beauty of this work is that so often we feel like we have to be disconnected or fragmented. Okay, I get to be this person here, this part of me isn't okay. But through kind of going to these parts of ourselves and these myths, we get to just, oh, this is this part and this is this part. And I get to just own it.
Yeah, just get to be in it.
Yeah.
Not
Hmm.
have to change or apologize, but say, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with me. Here's my
Yeah.
story reflected back."
Hmm.
Uh, that is incredibly healing. Oh, I love it. It's such a, I don't know, I always appreciate when we can have some containment around something, right? A little bit of a guide.
Hmm.
There's room to play, but just knowing I'm not all alone. And yeah, I'm excited to try this for myself.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really fun and I think again the beauty is that we can I think it fits with authenticity so easily.
Yeah.
Sometimes even just looking at a symbol, right? Like, looking at uh whether it's an oracle card or a tree or connecting with symbols or, watching a show and finding that we get lost in that character.
Yes.
All of these can kind of awaken these inner deep dives and that can be an anchor for us when we feel disconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times I will, not always on purpose, but just kind of intuitively just find an object that makes me feel comforted. It might be
Hmm.
like now it's, as seasons change, I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, I might look for a certain leaf or a flower, and it's just a sense of that symbolizes something personal for me. And it
yeah.
just is like a little, I don't know, nod from the universe. You're okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's really helpful. Um, so you're talking about authenticity and if we're feeling disconnected from ourselves, for me, symbols are a big way to find
Hmm.
reconnection.
Yeah.
But how can we find our way back to ourselves, that sense of authenticity, whether it be in creatively, spiritually, sexually? How
Hmm.
do we get back there? If we could say more about that.
Yeah. And I think so much of this is all connected, right?
Yeah.
I think it's releasing the sense of kind of shame or shoulds. It's starting to allow ourselves to just feel and drop in and recognizing when I think of sexuality, creativity, spirituality, whatever that is, I feel like it's this portal to this life energy, right? Like there's such meaning and depth to it of being able to be really seen and to see a partner in that way, to connect with our own bodies and discover, ooh, like, oh, that feels really amazing, and drop into that or come into flow with creativity or find the sacred with anything. Whether my favorite thing right now is I love to go look in the garden and I like to look at the bees kind of going in and out of the flowers, and I just it's like magic. I just feel so connected with everything. Or cooking or whatever that is just finding that we have this as HSPs, we can connect with such depth and meaning and sacredness in everything, and that it's not surface level. Like having sex doesn't have to just be this. I mean, it can be lovely and fun and all this, but there can also be this such a depth to it. Same with moving our bodies or being connected with the earth or reading a story. And I think slowing down and connecting with our bodies and embracing the sacredness that comes with that can really help with the authenticity.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really highlighting that it's available anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Just as we can find myths in pop culture,
Mm-hmm.
we can find depth and symbolism in our everyday lives. It sounds
Yeah.
like, yeah, there's the blissful and the mundane. Yeah, it's just hiding right there. Are you open to sharing a little bit more about maybe the personal symbols that you've worked with or drawn to, just to give folks an example or a few
Yeah,
more examples?
totally. So, kind of as I mentioned in undergrad, that was, I'd always known about myths and things like that, but that's when my whole world opened up. I really first connected with the Persephone myth at that point, which is, I won't deep dive into her myth, but basically, it's this journey of basically trauma and resilience and healing and integration. She ends up becoming queen of the underworld after a pretty difficult journey, but she also emerges from the underworld half of the year, and she's this playful maiden who's connected with the spring and running around the fields. And for me, her journey really symbolizes that descent and ascent. And for me, because of my own journeys of the underworld, that that's my grounding myth and that's my grounding symbol. So I'll oftentimes connect with the pomegranate symbol for her. I'll have in the springtime, I'll connect with that frolicky energy and feel the sun on me. When it's getting in more into winter and fall, I'll just feel how my body feels as the wind starts to come and just kind of feel connected to that universal story of resilience and healing and transforming through darkness and through pain. And so that's kind of how that shows up for me all year long and through
Yeah,
all of my journey.
I love that. Persephone is such a beautiful sensitivity
Yes. Yeah.
symbol. Just the kind of going into the different spaces, dark to light, and I can see why you're drawn to it from multiple levels.
Yeah.
It's beautiful that you could then, throughout the year, you're finding those little threads through, like you're always connected to that myth. And I'm just curious, personally, do you put like pomegranates out, or is it a ritual for you? Does it come into the physical world around you?
Yeah, it definitely does. So I don't know if you can see, but I got a little thing behind me where I have a
Oh
little
yeah.
like cauldron candle and some flowers, and I'll usually, kind of put, pomegranates, or I have in the other area of my home, I have kind of like an altar where I have like urns for my kitties who have passed and pictures of others who have passed. And I have a Persephone image there, and I have a lot of symbolism that connects with her there. So that's symbolizes that energy supporting me through grief and darkness. And so I'll kind of really connect with that symbol and have that around my house to kind of remind me okay, I'm held with this. This is part of life, right? Is that
Mhm.
darkness and that ascent. And so I bring in lots of those pieces.
Well, I love it. Yeah, there's so many opportunities to create these sacred, well, altars or
hmm
spaces.
Yeah.
And I love you have multiple throughout. It's beautiful because
Got
yeah,
all the little spots.
yeah, exactly. Just I just imagine 'cause for me, I have one primary one, but I guess I have other little spaces with
Yeah.
sacred objects, and it just makes me so happy and just a nice, I don't know, point of connection throughout the day. Yeah, I love
Oh,
that.
that
Hmm.
sanctuary of just
That's
being home. Yeah.
exactly that sanctuary. I'm wondering if there's anything else we should know about this work, using myth or symbols or archetypes that we haven't touched on.
Yeah. I think one thing that I really love about it is it's all about finding our own wisdom and our own intuition. I think in this day and age, right, it's all about we're bombarded all the time. Do
Yeah.
this, and then you're going to be happy, and you're not going to have the existential dread, and everything will be fine. And
Yes.
there's it's kind of intense, or this pressure of you should be this way, or this is the way to be healthy. And this archetypal work or this symbolism work or myth work is all about finding what works for us
Mm.
and connecting with our own inner wisdom. So, reading the Persephone myth or looking at a pomegranate and thinking, okay, does something light up for me?
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not. Maybe this other thing actually awakens something for me. Like, how do we connect with that, the life energy? And as sensitive beings,
Mm.
usually when we look at art, we kind of know what lights us up, or we hear sounds, or we're in nature, or we're reading stories or watching movies. It really invites us to come inwards and to trust our yeses and our nos on our healing journeys. And that's something that I love. It's so empowering and it's so unique for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, just the energy of that of following what is alive for you, what
Hmm
feels personal for you. That's such a life lesson for us as HSPs who
Yeah.
tend to try to fit in. And
hmm
as we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, you're thinking like, oh, I need to be like everybody else, essentially.
Yep.
I'm different. It's
hmm
like, no, you don't have to. You can be yourself and follow what you're drawn to. And this this work is a beautiful way to embody that. Staying in touch with yourself, staying in authenticity with yourself. And yeah, it's just a good practice for that.
It is. And to know that, I think it connects all of us, that this has
Yeah.
been themes that have run out through generations and generations. And, finding that wisdom for us, I think it is so grounding. And I think, as such HSPs, we can live in our heads a lot. So there's something really lovely about feeling grounded. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, a couple things there.
hmm
One, that has gotten me through the last few years of just knowing there's these cycles that repeat,
hmm
and I'm not the only one who's ever felt like this.
Yeah.
And it's very soothing to my
hmm
nervous system to know that. Um, yeah, and then just to have to do work that's tactile,
hmm
right? Setting up an altar,
Yeah.
finding, those objects out in nature,
Mhm.
putting up photo, whatever it is, reading through a book. Um, yeah, we need that that
All,
balance.
all the senses. I think that fits perfectly with this work is we read the myths, but we also think what comes alive in my body right now, or how do I connect with these symbols like from that tactile sensory experience, which I think is so powerful.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Julietta, this has been a really rich conversation. I just really appreciate. I can feel the excitement of the work, and it's really inspiring. And I mean, there's so much here for HSPs that I'm excited for people to dive into. And I know you have a ton of resources, more on the way.
Yes.
But I'll share everything in the show notes that you have so far. Your website, you have a new podcast coming out, Psyche Meets Mystic,
Yes.
which is sounds incredible. And you mentioned, we talked about Persephone. You have a Persephone meditation for folks, a free meditation.
Mhm.
So can you tell folks a little bit more about what that is, and then how else can they work with you?
Yes, absolutely. So the meditation, like I said, Persephone has been that archetype that has been, I'm just so passionate about Persephone. So I created a whole free meditation that really kind of brings you through descent and ascent, where you kind of connect with this archetype. You could connect with honoring your own grief, that darkness, that shadow, and then come into what feels alive and kind of go through that inner journey, that inner ascent, and kind of integrate and honor those two parts. And it also includes some journaling, reflection questions, and also kind of a deep dive into Persephone's myth and the symbols and how that can connect in the modern day in our own journey. So it's kind of this really free resource because I just feel like there's something so grounding, and I just wanted to kind of put that out there and offer that and, have that for people.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. And that what a beautiful way for folks who have listened to this conversation to start practicing and trying
Yeah.
it out, what it's like to work in that way. I'm definitely excited to try it because Persephone does seem so symbolic for sensitive people. I'll be curious to see what happens when I start to unfold the work, but what a perfect symbol.
Yes, I'm so excited to share it, and I'm also a podcast episode is going to be coming out about Persephone,
Oh,
where
perfect.
me and my friend Liz, who's actually a therapist turned priestess, she's talking all about the maiden aspect of Persephone, and I'm going into the shadow underworld part and how that's been my journey. And so it's a really fun episode. So
Cool.
that'll be coming up soon, and so people can check that out or work with me individually in therapy, where we can weave that into, sex therapy, existential, all that good stuff.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And right now you're seeing clients in California?
I'm seeing clients in California virtually, and do, sex and couples therapy, focusing on trauma, authenticity, and work with mainly highly sensitive and neurodivergent clients, and just working through all this human journey things. Yes.
I mean, yes. And to have a guide through this is such a incredible gift. So I'll definitely share all of your resources in the show notes. And please let me know about that episode.
Yes, I will say it's going to be launching soon, so I'm excited to share it.
Amazing.